Hemshech Ayin Beis, page 77, Ayin Zayin, volume 1, the beginning of the 12th discourse, Nachamu Ami, which is also the beginning of chapter 45. So the discourse 12, Frierdiker Rebbe categorizes it as being Veschanon, Hischalkus Asfiris Nikir Bislapshusin Ba'kelim, which means that the division of the spheres is distinguishable, is recognizable as they manifest in containers, which was the end of the discussion in the previous discourse. So as I said, he's winding down now the discussion about the spatial structure of the spheres of the cosmic order, and in the last section, the Rebbe Rashab was summing up what he discussed the previous 10 chapters in what does conceptual space mean. Mokim, defined by Milo Mata. Milo Mata means higher and lower. In this context, he discusses primarily two distinctions between the levels of the building blocks of existence. One is that they're fundamentally be'etzem u'husam, as he puts it, separate entities, and two, that they're different in their degree and measure of energy, which more specifically means in their closeness and their awareness of their source, of their divine. So energy here, when you say closer to a source, means it's more aware of its divine source. Something that's more aware of its divine source obviously has more bittul, less ego, less substance, and more sublimated and subjugated to that which is higher than itself. Something that's farther from the source will be more yesh, will be more about itself, and more about its own substance and identity than basically where it's coming from. But in the purpose of existence, you need to have both. So the point here is, this is how the structure of Seder Ishtalshalos works. And the last chapter, he explained that there are three specific ways the Zohar describes a sphere. Midah Gvul Tchum. By the way, I said about Shem Yediyah, it was Shem Yediyah, it means a known name. That every sphere has a known identity. And he distinguishes it's a midah, which means a measurement, a gvul is a parameter, and tchum is a boundary. And he explains that the difference between the etzem uhus, the fundamental identity and personality of each sphere, that's its midah. Gvul is its efen hagili, its way of expression, its form of expression, whether it should be abundant or diminished, ribu emiyat. And tchum, which means boundary, is what the containers impose on the energy, that says it should come till this point, at poetovai, this is its boundary. And he explains that refers to the diminishing of the energy in order for it to emanate into lower spheres. So if you really break it down, it comes down to every sphere has these three so-called structural parameters, definitions. One, it's fundamental, Chochmah is not Bina. It's a different entity. Then you have that Chochmah has more energy. You could say how much energy should be in Chochmah. First of all, Chochmah itself could have many different levels. Well, sometimes Chochmah has more energy, sometimes less. But that's another distinction. How much I would say, when I say energy, how much intensity. And then there's the third thing, is that the diminishing in Chochmah in order for it to be able to go into Bina, or the diminishing of intelligence in order to be able to go into emotions. So these are three different so-called measurements, and they're hinted to in those three expressions in the Zohar. That was the first part of last chapter, 44. The second half of last chapter was a summation that who creates all these measurements. It's the Kav. Kav Hamida, which literally means line of measurement, Kav Hamida. I think it's even a pasuk somewhere. One of the prophecies, one of the prophets. So Kav Hamida is like a paintbrush, as we said, that actually more than a paintbrush. You know those, what do they have today? They have like those pens that actually squirt out ink or something. So kav is not only measuring, but it channels. There's things there's these instruments that when you want to, the truth is every quill, an ink, when you take quill and put it in ink, so the quill is able to fine tune and exactly make exact letters. If you just use the ink with your fingers or just ink, it's going to be a blot. So the kav is a type of measuring rod that carries, it's a carrier, an agent that carries the energy and shapes and defines everything in existence based on these three things that he just said. And here's also three levels. This is how the kav begins as a nekuda, a point that doesn't occupy any space. It's completely shapeless. That's the 10 hidden spheres before the tzimtzum. That's how the artist envisions the structure. Then you have step 2, the tzimtzum conceals all the other possibilities. So now you have 10 distinct spheres, but they're still relatively shapeless. Relatively, not mamish shapeless, but relatively shapeless. And then comes how these energies manifest in containers, and that's when they take on substance, mitzias, and also shape and form. That's when Chochmah, Bina begin to become functional entities, functional forces. That's a summation of what we just learned. And now it begins the next mimer, continuing this discussion. And this mimer is already going to end, in the middle of this mimer is going to conclude a discussion that began in chapter 2, which is, what is Pnimi? So far, for over 40 chapters, we've been discussing Pnimi, which I've been defining as integrated energies. That's energies that integrate. And the main focus in Ayin Beis here is that the energies themselves are also Pnimim, meaning it's not just the containers that create the definitions and identities of the structure, but the energy itself, itself is Mitzuyah, which means itself has within it sefirot. Not as it's relatively shapeless, as I said, but it's still there. It's not like a colorless liquid in tinted glasses, where the liquid has nothing, and just the glasses create the color. Here he's going to, according to the Shita, that the air itself has structure, which is obvious. The reason for it, because that creates the unity, is the fullest unity than the structure of existence. In other words, our diversity and our individuality goes all the way up to the source. As I discussed yesterday at length, it's not, what the practical implication is, that's not like we all melt into one infinite light. We will maintain our parameters, even after Mashiach comes, even in the highest state of revelation. Diversity is not a contradiction to unity. It ultimately comes down to that there'll be diversity and harmony within diversity, we'll call it. So now we continue next mimer, page Ayin Zayin 77. Nachmu Ami. The reason I gave the summation was it's like also an overall summary of the general theme that's been discussed over all these chapters, all the details. So Nachmu Ami, page 77. This is, of course, a mimer that was delivered Shabbos Nachmu V'Eschanon that year, 1912, 100 years ago. So it begins with a haftarah of that of the parsha of that Shabbos, which is Nachmu Ami, be consoled, my nation. Yemer lekechem, so says God. Your God has said, be consoled, my nation. The Navi is saying this. Dabru alev Yerushalayim v'koru eleha. Speak to the heart of Yerushalayim, of Jerusalem, and call out to her. This is the opening of the haftarah. V'tzorach lahavin, the Rebbe Rashab asks, Mahu hakfilus nachmu ami. What is this redundancy, the repeat of the word nachmu twice? Could have just said nachmu ami. But Rashi comments, Atem Nevi'eh, you, my prophets, Nachmu Asami, you, my prophets, you shall console my nation. V'hainu shezeu hadibur leNevi'im sheyenachmu es Yisrael. So in other words, that this is really, Nachmu is really the Eibishter speaking, Hashem speaking to the Nevi'im, to the prophets, that you should console the Jews. So apparently this may answer the double Nachamu. It's almost like Hashem is saying Nachamu, and then the Nevi'im are saying Nachamu. But the Rebbe Rashab continues, V'gam ze in the moving, Ma'u inyan hadibru l'Nevi'im she'yanachmu. What is this thing? What is behind this? The speaking to the telling the Nevi'im that they should console. Haloi dibur hanavu zeh gufa anachama. The fact that Hashem is telling them to be menachem, that alone is the nachama. That alone is the consolation. So what is the addition that they say to the Jews? No, as Hashem says to the Nevi'im, Nachamu Ami, console them. What's the additional element that besides God telling the Nevi'im say to the Jews as if there's another level going on here, a second Nechama. So when Hashem says to the prophets, Nachamu, console them, meaning the people, it's Mahare Mashmos, it's apparent, there's some type of consolation besides the words of the Nevuah itself. Besides the words of the Nevuah itself, that God says the Nevuah, the prophecy, to console them, the fact that they say console, He's telling the Nevuim to say Nachamu, there's an additional element here. We have to understand what is this additional Nachama. We have to look at Rashi, but it looks like what he's saying is that Nachamu Ami is Hashem saying the Nevuah, be consoled, and the second Nachamu is the Nevi'im saying it to the Jews. What's the addition of the second one? That's Pashtus, the Shaila here. Right? Okay. Medrash Rabba Isa Loksa b'kaflayim v'nocham b'kaflayim. Medrash Rabba says that just like he struck them with b'kaflayim, double striking from Lashon Loksa, from hitting, nocham b'kaflayim. So you also console them b'kaflayim. The Loksa b'kaflayim, it says, what does it say? The expression. Does he bring it here? Right. Okay. What's the expression? Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. So it says Kiflayim is the lashon. What is the lashon? Where is that lashon? To say the pasuk. Oh, okay. So that explains, in other words, the Medrash is explaining the double redundant, because just like you struck them in twice with the two, the Medrash brings a whole bunch of Loksa b'kaflayim. The lashon is also twice. So also the Nechama is double. Ve'eina move ma'u inyan Loksa b'kaflayim. Not understood. What means Loksa b'kaflayim? What means to strike someone twice? Eich sheich sheyichaz v'sholem ha'einish b'kaflayim alachet. How could you punish a double punishment on a sin? So we can understand the consolation should be a double one, because midah teva, a good midah, a good attribute, is meruba midah paranius, is the expression. Means it's more than the what's the word I wanted to use? The retribution. The paranius, the punishment is the right word, but it's not really the paranius. Retribution, yeah. So there you could say the nechama, that when God forbid somebody gets hurt, God will console them more than what's necessary, because it's meruba mitay. But what does it mean? What does it mean to somebody did something wrong and they deserve a punishment? Why double? Why give them double punishment? And clearly, when you're saying Loksa b'kaflayim, you're saying not that they sinned twice. You're saying that you're giving them. That's the whole point. That you're doing it twice, even though they deserve one. And because you struck them twice, that's why you console them twice. In other words, the consolation twice is not because Maruba midah teva, because it's good to give something more when you repair. But it's because there was an extra striking, a double one. That's why you also this. So what is this double, this redundant, this kefil? Gam tzarich lahav mashakasav dibru v'koru. What does it mean when he says dibru alev Yerushalayim v'koru? Speak v'koru and call out. The lechera ein zeh k'fi haseder shetzarich liyos kriya kedem ledibur. Apparently, seemingly, this is not the order. The order should have been first you call before you speak. Like it says, Vayikra al Moshe Vayidaber. He called to Moshe and he spoke to him. Here he's saying, speak and then call. First you call out someone's name and then you speak to them. That's the question. Why here is the order reversed? It first says speak and then call. As I said, this whole beginning is the Rebbe Rashab added later. So it's like the beginnings and ends of the Maimorim came later. When I mean later, I mean to say that first he wrote the whole flow, doesn't have any, without a break between Maimorim, and then at some point he broke them into names of Maimorim, and then he delivered them in these parshas. But it was written before they were delivered. So these beginnings and ends were written probably before the Shabbos. Or maybe it could have been a while before, but it's a second stage of writing of Ayin Beis. So then he continues now where he left off. This also is written later. So until the new paragraph, always the new paragraph is the flow. Vihine actually flows from the end of last Maimer Vashir. So if you really want to read it exactly where the Rebbe Rashab wrote it, you'd read Vashir Chulu and jump straight to Vihine. This is an addition. The same Rebbe wrote it, so obviously we're reading it in this order. But it's sometimes interesting if you really want to see exactly how it was written. This is how it actually flows. And this is like a connect. Now he connects it. To understand all this, meaning these questions on Nachamu, basically the Rebbe Rashab is grounding the Hemshech in the weekly parsha. We have to preface by what we discussed earlier that Atzilus that the 10 spheres of Atzilus are in a form of division, of distinction, diversity of higher and lower. And we discussed what means higher and lower. He's going to explain. Shachachma hi bebchinas Maila L'gababina. He says in the footnote Maila. The word should be added. Bebchinas Maila L'gababina. Chachma is higher than Bina. What does that mean? I'm sorry. V'ameichen b'chlalim bebchinas Maila L'gabazah v'chein zah L'gab Malchus. Shubchinas Sefer the Kol Dargin Atzilus. So basically, the 10 spheres, which is structured Chachma Bina. Then we go Midas, Chesed Gvura Tiferes Netzach Yisod. That's Zah, and Malchus. So we have four divisions. Chachma Bina. Here he's not counting Das because he goes with Keser. When you speak this structure, Keser is the sphere. So you have Chachma is one level, Bina is another. Then comes Zah. Zah Ampin is Chesed through Yisod, and then Malchus. He says all of them. One is a mile over the other. So Chachma is higher than Bina. Meichen is high as Maila compared to Zah, Midas, and Zah is compared to Malchus, which is the lowest of the 10 spheres. V'nizbayed, so that's the structure of the spheres. V'nizbayed, and it was explained. What's Maila Mata? That Maila Mata bebeis inyanim. Two things distinguish higher and lower when you're talking spiritual structure. Remember, there's no higher and lower like in the first floor, second floor, 10 feet high, 100 feet high, a mile high or low. Here, what means higher and lower? So he says two things. The first thing that distinguishes higher and lower in the spheres is ribuy miyat, is abundance and diminishment. Ribuy means much, or intensity. You could say ribuy is more, and miyut is less. Increasing or diminished energy. So what defines higher and lower? A higher sphere means it has abundant and much energy. What does that mean? It means in the revelation of the divine infinite light, it has abundance of that. And this energy is diminished and concealed from level to level. That's what distinguishes higher and lower. So you want to say higher, you have to say more energy, more divine energy. Lower is less divine energy, revealed energy we're talking here. revealed energy. So if you were talking, for example, in a physical context, you'd say physical space, as I said, is higher and lower based on one person is 5 feet tall, another person is 5 feet 2 inches tall, another person is 6 feet tall. A building is 100 stories, 200 stories, 500 stories. We have physical measurement. If you talk about conceptual measurement in the physical world, for example, you could also say things have different levels of energy. Like, for example, let's take the energy that goes into a light bulb, or the energy that's flowing into an air conditioner. We know one has a lot more energy than the other. The energy from it would go into a light bulb, it would burst the light bulb. So you could say there are things in this world that have less energy, more energy. Right? We know today that nuclear energy has a lot more nuclear energy than there is other types of energy. So this energy has levels. But there, it's all about intensity of the energy. What the difference in spiritual structure is that the energy is connected to divine energy. So something that's more energy means it's more divine, it's more godly, which really means it's less ego, less identity, and more connected to its source. Whereas in the physical world, everything does not sense its source. But we still can understand higher and lower conceptually, even in the physical world. Okay, so that's one way of defining Ayin Beis. Va'beis be'etzem muhusam u'madregasam. And the second distinction of Ayin Beis is their fundamental identity, muhusam u'madregasam, and their level. That the higher sefirah is higher in its fundamental nature than the lower sefirah. Now this was explained much earlier. The Rebbe Rasha began this discussion right here. Chapter 38. Chapter 38, he made this distinction. I want to just elaborate a moment, because you could argue, what else is there in the Ruchnius if it's all it is energy? So more and less energy means that's what it's Etzem Muhusas. So I explained, and I'll explain again here, that you could have, theoretically, you could say you have 10 spheres, that's only one personality. And it just goes through 10 diminishing states. There's no qualitative difference between Chochmah and Bina. You could just say Chochmah is intense intelligence, and Bina is weaker. You slow down the energy, so now you have Bina. You slow it down even more, and it comes into Midas. And you could basically say that from the perspective of energy, there's no difference between the one and the other. From the perspective of the containers, yeah, because emotions are clearly different than the mind. But you could say from the energy perspective, all that's happening is a diminishing of energy, like I said with the glasses. If you have a flow of water, and you put it into a small glass, okay, it's going to take on a small shape. You put it into a big glass, a big shape. If the glass is shaped like a circle, like a sphere, it's a sphere. If it's shaped like an oval, it's an oval. Basically, the energy is just basically being channeled according to the shape of the containers. So you can argue that the energy only goes through as a matter of either more revealed or more diminished. If the container can take more of me, I come more of me. If it can only take less of me, so it's less of me, meaning the energy. You could also argue the same thing as, for example, what did I want to say? Not just the shape. In the quantity of the energy. Meaning, if it's a very small container, it's going to have very little energy. Not just the shape. Also, if it's a big container, it's going to have more energy. But you could argue that there's no Be'etzem Muhus, there's nothing in the energy that has a real difference between Chochmah and Bina. Like electricity. Is there a difference in electricity that goes into a light bulb, or into air conditioner, or into a refrigerator? No. Same electricity, Con Ed sends electricity to your house. Electricity enters the wires. It depends what you plug in. Now obviously, as I said before, if the container is too small, too much energy, the flow is not, it's going to burst. It's going to blow. But the energy itself, if you look at electricity, there's no difference of electricity running into one appliance or another appliance. So you can make the argument that there's nothing in Be'etzem Malchus on the electricity level that distinguishes it from one level to the next. So the Chiddush is no, it's not correct. That this distinction of Maila Mata is not just Ribui and Miut, it's also the personality. The energy itself that goes into, hypothetically, into a refrigerator is different than the energy that goes into a light bulb. That's not electricity, so it's not a good example. But in the case in the spiritual realms, when God envisioned Chochmah, He envisioned a different entity than Bina. Two different entities. Then, as He explained in chapter 38, that defined that Chochmah is going to have a certain type of energy, Ribui, and Bina will have less energy. So basically, the degree of energy is defined by the identity, not the other way around. So the example I gave with electricity is the opposite. Electricity has no shape and form. It's the identity of the container that shapes and defines the energy. Here's the opposite. The energy has a shape and form. What is Chochmah? Chochmah is, like he explained, is a fundamentally different entity than Bina. It's not just intense intelligence, and Bina is diminished Chochmah. It's not at all that way. Chochmah, as he said, is Ayin. It connects to the etzem hamuchus of the thing. You, like he said, what do you say with Chochmah? He says that it's really hanocha. It's a sense of a certain conviction. It has elements in it that Bina will never have, that under comprehension doesn't have. And then Chochmah therefore has more energy, and Bina has less energy. I just wanted to elaborate a moment what this means, which only makes the case even more how much the Rebbe Rashab is bending over backwards, basically, to make a case that the structure of existence is not just on the container level. It's all the way in the root, all the way up to the sefirot Sagnuzis. Which is, it's a tremendous emphasis to do this. All these explanations are coming to explain that the structure of existence is negeya all the way to the etzem, into the kavana elyena. Because you could argue, as I said before, that we need a structure. But at some point, you give up on the structure, and Kabbalah Sale unites us all. The answer is no. The union has to be all in every detail. Every detail is negeya, is critical to the big picture. And it's not just that the details are for our level or on a lower level. They are part of the way it's all envisioned. Okay. So now we continue, chapter 45, Mem Hey. And now, besides the fact that the 10 spheres are in detail, in their detailed levels, in their specific levels, they're in a form of higher and lower, meaning distinguished by their fundamental difference and their ribuy amiyat, the measure of energy, degree of energy. Hine klos esesfir shebe'elam esabiyahim b'chinas ma'elamata. So in addition to that which we've discussed till now, also the general picture, the general structure of the 10 spheres in the 4 worlds of Atzilus, Beriyah, Yetzirah, are also in a form of ma'elamata. So till now he's been discussing Chochmah, Bina, Midas, Malchus. So we learned how each of them is a fundamentally different than the other, and each one has either more or less energy, degree of energy. Now he's going to the general structure of the spheres. The whole structure in general in the worlds are also defined by levels, meaning as these spheres evolve from one level to the next, one dimension to the next, they also have a structure. I'll explain that once we learn it a bit. In other words, all this was in Atzilus. The question is now, when the spheres move over to Beriyah, from Atzilus to Beriyah, do they also, or they just diminished energy? Or is there also Ma'alamata? The answer is, of course, there's Ma'alamata also in the gradations of the spheres as they descend. Maybe I should explain it before I go further. In general speaking, when you speak about the structure of existence, we work everything from the bottom up. It means we look at the world and we try to understand what's going on. Obviously, the Rebbe Rashab here is speaking from the top down. But let's go from the bottom up for a moment. When you look at the universe, so we know the universe has a structure. You don't even need to be a believer to know that. Science is constantly trying to understand the structure of existence and the laws of the nature. Every scientific discovery is about understanding what makes this world make sense. Meaning it's a sensible structure and it has parameters. So a scientist will tell you that any object on Earth that you see with your eyes is made up of smaller items. This was a chiddush. If you look at a child, let's say a child that knows nothing, you see a table is a table. It's a discovery to realize a table is made up of something, and that something is made up of smaller things, and each thing is made up of smaller things. We take it for granted, but it's a wisdom. It's not just obvious. Now it's obvious once you break a table into parts, you see it's made of wood, and wood comes from a tree, and what is the tree made of? So the way the scientists would say is that an item in this world is made up of elements. So there's the element, there's the table of elements, which includes oxygen and hydrogen and all the different elements. Everything in this world is made up of a certain amount of elements. How many elements are there today? 100 and something. Yeah. So they're basic elements. For example, water is H2O. It's 2 degrees of hydrogen to 1 degree of oxygen. You mix 2 parts of hydrogen and oxygen, that's what made water. Now, hydrogen and oxygen are already elements that you're going to find in other items. So suddenly a world that's made up of billions of things has been broken down to 100 and some particles. If you go even broader, we break it sometimes down to Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Ofer, the 4 basic elements. Today that's not so much used in science. It's still 4 basic principles, but everything made up of those 4 elements. Then those elements themselves, the next level scientists would say, is made up of molecules. Okay? So those elements are made up of molecules. Like I just said, an element would be hydrogen, another one would be oxygen, and each one of them has molecules. And those molecules in turn are made up of atoms. That's the name of it. Atoms are made up of subatomic particles. The general atom is made up of they say electron, a neutron, and a proton. But today we know they're subatomic particles, and just 2 weeks ago they discovered, they think, one more elementary particle called the Higgs boson. Bosons are subatomic particles. So now we've gotten down to a point where the question is, how far can you go? As they say, how deep can you go down the rabbit hole? You ever been down there, Rabbi? How far have you gone? How far can you go? So no question, from a scientific point of view, no scientist will tell you there's an end. They could say there's subatomic particles and sub. Who knows how far? How far is the universe? How far is the solar system? How far out of space can we go? As far out, because it's the same way you can go in. Will you ever hit Atzilus? I don't think science may hit Atzilus because they won't have tools to measure it. Because it's all about tools. Nobody's seen a subatomic particle, by the way. You cannot see one. You can't even see an atom, even with a microscope. You can only surmise that it's there based on the results. So you see its effect. So you know there must be something there. Now, if you asked so on another example, you see it's raining outside. Okay, raining outside, so we take out an umbrella or a raincoat or we ignore it. It's raining, fine. You ask a meteorologist, and they'll tell you rain is a result of pressure systems. Like now, there's a lot of humidity in the air, so it's going to there'll be a thunderstorm. They can predict it, they can't predict it. They usually predict it by seeing which way the wind is blowing and looking with that direction with the weather there, so they know it's going to come here soon. That's one of the big chachmas. Yeah, find out in Cleveland what's happening. If the wind is blowing to New York, it's just a matter of time. I want to dismiss all the weather reports, but basically it's like that. Now, if the wind changes course.
It's very complicated.
I understand.
These huge computers, they all this pressure.
It's pressure systems, meteorology. Yeah. But usually their predictions don't necessarily work out so well. My grandfather knew more from the way his knee felt about the snow and the rain than sometimes the weather reports. I'm not trying to dismiss all of it. It's a joke. Anyway, the point is like this, that So then a scientist tells you there's forces behind it. The question is, how far can you go? So this is all we'll call science is still the physical sciences. They'll tell you the physical forces, except you can't see them, but they're still physical in some way. Then there's a thing called metaphysical. Metaphysical means it goes beyond the physical. Like if you see a person cry, tear comes out of your eye, you know that there must be either sadness or joy inside the person. Usually sadness. For some reason, when you're sad, it causes some physical effect in your body that causes your ear duct, your eye duct rather, to liquid builds up, and you start crying. There's different scientific theories why. So when you see someone cry, you don't say first there's tears in the eyes, then you feel sad. First you feel sad, then it comes into crying. So sadness, in a way, I can't call it a subatomic particle, but in a way, it's a cause. You can call it a psychosomatic. They call it an emotional cause that will manifest in a physical reaction. Or a person smiles. You feel happy inside, suddenly you see a smile on the face. You see it even with children. It's natural. So there's physical reactions of so-called, we'll call it metaphysical forces. Now, it's not so difficult to take it one step further and say, when it rains outside, maybe it's the angels crying. Maybe the cosmic forces are crying. A higher level. And express itself like we see tears out of the eyes. So there's tears that come out of the sky. Or the clouds, whatever. My point that I'm making here is that this is already I would not call this the realm of science, but it's not out of the realm of logic to say there are forces that make things work. Why am I giving this whole elaboration? I just want to explain the spheres in simple English. In simple English, without using the word spheres, or elemus even, worlds, you're basically trying to dissect what Chassidus, Kabbalah, Chassidus does. They go the next step after science. Science will tell you the physical energies, the elements, the molecules, the atoms and subatomic particles that shape existence. And Kabbalah Chassidus, Primus Atera, will teach you the metaphysical, so-called subatomic particles, that shape the subatomic particles, which in turn will become atoms and then molecules, elements, and a physical world. So when you look at fire, Aish, so good, a scientist will tell you Aish is made up of certain particles, and that when they interact, that's why it's red, and that's why it's hot, and that's why it burns. Water is made up of, as I said, H2O, hydrogen, oxygen, that's why it has its properties and its personality. And Kabbalah Chassidus will say, Mayim, its root is chesed. Chesed. What's chesed? Chesed is an archetype. It's a form of energy. It's a form of energy which gives. Chesed flows, that's why Mayim flows. Chesed is soft and gentle, water is soothing. Chesed makes things grow, that's why water makes things grow. And it's not just a nice poetic thing, it actually evolves. Take Ruchnis the Chesed and turn it into Gashmis, it's water. Water is Chesed, embodiment of Chesed. No different than tears is embodiment of your sadness. Now, of course, a tear, you look at a tear, it's not sad, because now it's a physical entity, but it's an expression of it. It doesn't have anything else but that. I'm just using it as an example. So if you really look at a Makubal, a Kabbalist, or a Chassid looks at the world, so we see green trees and birds and a blue sky. A scientist will tell you, I see photosynthesis, and the reason it's green is because, there's a reason things are green, is because green gives off a certain type of energy, it gives off a certain type of chemicals, everything has the colors, shapes, everything is defined. Scientists will tell you why everything is a certain color. It's not an accident that most leaves and things are green. It's because of the photosynthetic interactions that causes it to be green. And a chassid or a ben Teda would say, the sky is blue because the chel is deimel liyam and yam deimel l'rekia and rekia deimel l'kisei hakoved. So it takes one jump. The reason is tchel is blue is similar to the sea. The sea reflects the sky. The sky reflects the kisei hakoved. She took one jump into a ruchnisdika level. And as I said, it's not so crazy to understand it because we today understand everything is made up of forces beneath forces. Psychologically, for sure, this is the way. You see somebody get angry. You right away know there's a cause. Not that there's an excuse to get angry, but you say a person has got angry. If you dig deep, sometimes you find the person has a lot of deep embedded resentment that goes back who knows how many years. And then just like a volcano, the pressures build up, it erupts. You see a volcano, everyone understands that there's something under the ground that's been building for years, and now it erupts. The fact that we don't see the cause, and we only see things, we only look at the external, is only because of our limited or blind vision. So the idea of understanding the spheres is understanding the building blocks that shape all of existence. Everything, just like they say there are 100 and some elements, and there's so many particles and so on, we'll say there's 10 spheres. Mix them the right way, and you have everything that exists in this world. Asara mamoris nivra elam. When it says God, 10 utterances, as he says in Sharich V'Emunah, it's not 10. 10 is the basic ones. But mix them together, the tzirufim, and the gematrios, and all the different muras, and chilufim, etc., of how the letters interact, and everything is like, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, Evan. But Evan, a stone. The Rebbe didn't say, let there be a stone. But when a combination of other letters that he said, also comes a stone. The 10 utterances, the 10 mamoras, evolved from the 10 dibris, the 10 commandments, and the 10 commandments are evolved from the 10 spheres. So basically we have in the 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, that's why sometimes you say 10 spheres, 100, 10 times 10, sometimes 1,000. You combine them in the right way, everything in existence can be explained. What's a piece of wood? I'm not a master of everything, but a piece of wood is usually a combination of chesed, gvura, and maybe heit shebe gvura. And if you look in Kabbalah, it'll tell you exactly what are the properties within every item in existence. That would be a nice map to make of everything. Huh? A table, exactly. Now, what are the elements in this context? The elements is simply what stage you're at as these energies evolve. So, when they come in this world, we'll call it fire and water. What are they a step before they became fire and water? The answer is it'll be chesed and gvura of asiyah. Go a step above that, it's chesed and gvura of Yetzirah. What's before that? Chesed and gvura of Beriyah. And then chesed and gvura of Atzilus. We'll stick to the 4. Because that's, even though these 4 repeat themselves many times throughout Shtalshlus, Klolas, Pratis, but essentially 4 levels. What does that mean? So let's define it. Just like I said before with the spheres, the same thing with the worlds. I'm just giving an introduction to this whole Maya Lamata. It'll be a lot easier to understand. So here's how it goes. Think of the 4 worlds as 4 stages of how something comes into being. One of the best examples I think for this is that everything in this world, everything, has to go through 4 steps, from a concept, from a vision, to the final product. And here's how it works. Whether you're an architect building a building, a writer writing a book, a composer of music, a business plan, always 4 steps. First step is a vision, a concept and a vision. You have the person envisions an idea. I want to build Google or Facebook, okay? Or I want to build a building in Manhattan that's going to look like the World Trade Center. So you have a vision. The vision can be general, then you start thinking more specifics. The next step is you must create an outline. You have to take the vision and put it on paper. In general terms, you know what an outline is. An outline is general structure. It's like a skeleton. Like you see it also when you build a building. You put it down, there's an outline. The architectural plans is an outline. Even when you begin building, you don't build the whole building at once. You first build a skeleton, the outline, the general, the foundation, the general structure of the existence. Then comes the next is Yetzirah. You give it shape and form. You take the outline and you say, let's say the outline has, let's say, the Rambam have Yudalit Sfarim, right? Sefer Hayad. She has Sefer Hamada. And Sefer Hamada now has Hilchus Seder Teira, Hilchus Tshuva, etc., etc. So you start breaking the outline into details, and you break it down further and further and further. And then comes the final 4th step. When you finish the product, and now it's a full-bodied building. It's a book. You don't begin writing a book, you begin writing first chapter outlines. You have the idea, and now you say, I'm going to break it into parts. The parts, then you flesh them out even detail. And then you finally have a final book. And the final book, Seif Ma'aseh V'Machshava Tchila, should be fulfilling what you first envisioned. And if it isn't, there was some problem in between, which is very often what happens. So here's 4 steps. The vision is Atzilus. Everything there is Elam Ha'achdus, and Atzilus is the vision of existence in God's mind. Think of God as the artist. Beriyah is the outline. Chemer without a tzura. It's raw matter. So it's the basic outline. Yeah. Then comes tzura. After the outline, the skeleton, you have to give it shape, tzura, shape and form. And then Asiya is the final product. So take now the sefirot, because these are just what I just said is 4 worlds, 4 dimensions. But how do they apply to the sefirot? Now we take a sefirot. Let's take chesed. So what does chesed look like in Atzilus? What does chesed look like in Asiya? In Atzilus, chesed is God envisioned that there should be a concept, let's call it love. What is love? Love is the ability for a person to give to another person. Ability for a person to go out of his own selfish self. Like he says in Tanya, that the soul is primary, spirit is primarily, basically. The idea that it's not all about me, it's about giving. That's chesed. Pure chesed would have the ability to just give. Then it has to take on shape. How is it going to look like in this world? So the first thing is the chemer, then comes the building of chesed, how it's built. So you have Beriyah, then you have it in the level of Yetzirah, in shape and form, and then you have the final product. So now we have love. Each of us has chesed in our hearts. What does our chesed look like? Well, our chesed does not necessarily look like what it looks like in Atzilus. It is selfish sometimes. It can sometimes be distorted. Why? Because God created a way that as it goes down from level to level, it loses sight of its purpose. Imagine now a building, okay, that the architect has a vision, you make an outline, but then the plumbers and the electricians look at the building and they say, you know what? We think we want to change the plan here. What happens? So now you have a distortion. It's no longer aligned. When you say a neshama of Atzilus, a Rebbe is a neshama of Atzilus, what does it mean? It means as he is down here on earth, he's exactly aligned the way Atzilus envisions the structure of the 10 spheres. The Alter Rebbe would fall asleep Friday afternoon. Because why? Because in Atzilus, in the higher worlds, it's Durmita Dezah, it's a time of sleep. Spiritual type of transition takes place, so he's aligned. Rabbi Paritcher knew that that's when the world falls asleep, so he would go down, take a nap. The rest of us, neither of the two. We take naps at different times. The Alter Rebbe knew in prison, day and night, because he knew the tzirufim, it says. He knew what does it mean. He could sense. He doesn't need a clock. A clock is just measuring for us. We have to be told 2 weeks is Tisha B'Av, and Tisha B'Av you fast. A person aligned doesn't have to be told anything. He wakes up, he knows it's Tisha B'Av because the energy of the day is tragedy. It's Beis HaMikdash. But we're not that sensitive, so we're not aligned to things. We're aligned to physical reactions. You feel your body is hungry, no one has to tell you to look in a book and tell you you're hungry. Comes to Ruchnistic things, we have to be told what's going on. Rosh Hashanah is certain energy, Yom Kippur another, Sukkot is Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot is Chanukah, etc., etc. So bottom line is the 10 spheres define the elements, the basic building blocks of existence, the DNA, and the worlds define what stage they're at. So you could basically create a whole therapeutic model and say, love, I see a relationship, I see a marriage that's not working. Where did it wander away? How asiya is it? And how do we realign it to Yetzirah, to Beriyah, all the way back to Atzilus? Now, can you do it perfectly? We're not perfect human beings, but we can try. So we have a standard. So Atzilus is really like the standard. You want to know when it says in Sefer HaBoyer that when Avram Avinu began to function, Sefer HaBoyer, it says the chesed of Atzilus came to the Eibush and said, what do you need me for? You have chesed out down there. Can you imagine? Chesed of Atzilus is saying you have a walking chesed on earth. So it says, Chassidus brings this. The chesed said to the Eibush, what do you need me? Avram is chesed now. Because Avram was embodiment of chesed on earth. And Yitzchak was the embodiment of Gvura on earth. And Yaakov was Teferes. And Moshe Chochmah, or however you interpret Moshe. Every character, personality of the Torah is another one of the spheres playing itself out on this earth.
So what happened there with Avram Avinu and Chesed and Atzilus?
It's a good question. I don't know the end of the story. Maybe the Eibishter said, hey, listen, Avram, one day Avram is not going to be on earth, so I still need you. Don't go anywhere, you know.
According to the picture that you pictured, I don't get exactly what means that Avram Avinu represented the Chesed Atzilus in its purity. What it was.
Let's put it this way: when Mashiach comes, the ultimate Geula, you're going to have an Asiyah. Atzilus will be on earth, so to speak. The Gilui of it. Remember, Atzilus. All Atzilus is the structure aligned to the divine plan in a perfect way. And Asiyah is not. No, Chesed Asiyah is already. That's why we say. One second, we say Beriyah is Zubetev Miyut Ra. What means Ra? Not free will. There's no free will, but it's yesh.
Off level.
Yesh. It's starting to become a yesh.
Okay.
And Chesed Atzilus knows that it's love that God created, and it's aligned with God's plan. In Beriyah, it already has a sense of self. It didn't yet come to the point of doing something wrong, but then in Yetzirah it says Chetzi Tev, Chetzi Ra. Basically, Chetzi Yesh, Chetzi Bittel. If you want to put it that way.
In terms of the vision of the builder who built this.
Let me put it to you this way. You could describe 4 types of people, how they love, and I could show you whether this is an Atzilus love, a Beriyah love, a Yetzirah love, or a Asiyah love, or a Asiyah Chumri Dika love. There's more levels. It can get. The worst possible love is when a person loves themselves and distorts and abuses love. You know, you could have real klipa. You know, the Nazis, did they love? Yeah, they loved with themselves, but it was complete the worst possible love, as far away from God as it can be. You could have that type of love. That's complete distortion. Then you can have a love that is not so evil, but it's not focused to godliness either. That's what klipas nega means. It can go either way. And then you have a love of Kedusha. That's the way it's supposed to be. I mean, I'm not even talking now Avos Hashem. I'm talking about even love between human beings. You have Shalei Lishma, Bo Lishma. My point is, I'm not spelling out, but if you want examples, all you got to do is add the word yesh. How much of the yesh is in there? How much self-interest is there? The more self-interest, rest assured, the farther it is from God's plan. Now, God wants us to have self-interest too. So, Mishalei Lishma, Bo Lishma, from ulterior motives. The point I'm trying to say in Atzilus, there's no self-interest. There's no self. It's a line. It's a structure. It's 10 spheres. That's the whole point. Avram, so Bichlal, it stays in Atzilus. But when you have a neshama like Avram comes down, you have an Atzilus on earth. The Rebbe brings from Lekutei Torah and Nitzavim that when Moshe spoke to Pare, it was Atzilus in Asiyah speaking to Pare. It was as if Atzilus was speaking to him. It's a big chiddush that, because usually, let's put it this way, what means all neshamas coming from Atzilus? The difference is an express train or a local train. You know, when we go through Beriyah, Yetzirah, Asiyah, we assume the properties of those worlds. So our shadish is in Atzilus, but it's not. You're not a neshama of Atzilus. You're now a neshama that's gone through a lot of, let's put it this way, filters.
Putting on weight.
Veils. You put on a lot of weight. Exactly.
What does chaymer mean?
Chaymer means, depends how you define it. Chaymer can be raw material before it has shape and form, like an outline. I explained it like an outline. Like a person takes a piece of clay and they just make a general outline before they start. You know, like you see an artist or a sculptor, they first make a general image, then they'll start engraving the details, or every building, anything we build, I said, from business plan to a physical structure, goes through 4 things: Atzilus, Beriyah, Yetzirah, Asiyah. A vision, a concept, a general outline, skeleton, details, final product. It's the law of existence. And if you skip one of those steps, there's going to be a flaw in your plan. Like if you jump from one of them, if you try to jump to the Yetzirah without Beriyah, show me someone that writes something that didn't have first an outline. You'll see that there's a disorganization involved, because the details have to follow. It's like prat comes from klal, not the other way around. Now, sometimes as you develop it, you may go to the details and go back. I know for myself, everything starts. You have to have an outline in your mind or on paper before if you really want to have clarity, and then you break it down. It's almost like Chacham and Bina in a certain way. But the point I'm making all of this is I just wanted to spell out in simple English what the structure of existence is like. And then it'll be much more understandable what the Rebbe Rashab is. Because what the Rebbe Rashab is saying is what I just said, everything I just said last half hour, is assumed by the Rebbe Rashab, that we know already. The problem is you start learning this, and if you don't know it, you can learn the aces, but you don't really understand what's the point. So now what he's saying in this chapter, he's saying after we discuss the structure of the spheres themselves, the Chochmah is one thing and Bina, now there's also Ma'alamata as they move from one level to the next, from one world to the next. That's what he's going to basically say. The key thing is you have to always, the My Benayu, it comes down to, you have to be able to explain these concepts in a way that has a practical application. It's either four worlds. If you have a practical application like I just described, then you're talking business. The sphere is the same thing. If you don't, you're talking complete abstract ideas that maybe make sense, it feels right, but you can't play the music. It's like getting the song, but not being able to really explain to somebody why is it important to know there's four worlds? Why is it important to know there's 10 spheres? Because it's really us. We're talking about ourselves. This is what we're made of. This is the building blocks of us, of existence. Good? Move on. Wanted to say something?
Yeah, what is the step from Yetzirah to Asiyah? What do you see?
I explained it more. I mean, you can explain it several ways, but I explained it more. Yetzirah is like when you finish the outline, but you don't have a final. Like let's take a building. Yeah, make the skeleton. Then they start filling in the rooms. Like here right now, they're building the stadium on Atlantic Avenue. I watch when I drive by. So of course, we first saw an outline. Now I already see that you can see what it's going to look like. But it's not a C yet. It's not a final product. A C is when you polish up the last stages, and you see the full product. It's more than just Yetzirah to Chaimer. That's what I'm saying. It adds, I guess, it's the final touches. It's the things that go back to the original plan and make sure it's all aligned. I mean, you could explain it many ways. In Elamis, Atzilus' division, Chaimer Tzur is for sure Beriyah Yetzirah, Yetzirah, Beriyah Cheshach, Yetzirah. And then you have Asiyah is usually the three-dimensional. It's the final dimensional. That's the way my understanding is.
There's such a bigger gap between Asiyah and Yetzirah. It's just
not really. Actually, I see almost like not so much. Because once you have, think practically. The person's made an outline. They've already filled now all the details in. Yetzirah, so what's missing? In Asiyah. Don't think of Asiyah now, Asiyah Gashmis. I'm not talking about the Yeshma. I'm not talking about the Gashmis addition. I'm talking about Asiyah Ruchnis now. You're talking about the Gashmis? That's what you mean. Oh, okay.
What's Asiyah?
Asiyah Ruchnis is the final details that are not there in the Yetzirah. It's like the final thing. Then comes something I didn't even mention. Then comes God does something that adds a physical, so-called package around all this. That I didn't even mention. That's Asiyah Gashmis already.
Asiyah Ruchnis before the before the
Yishmael. Yeah. Yes. Before Geshem Mamish there's Asiyah Ruchnis, yes. So there's Asiyah Gashmis, Asiyah Ruchnis, then comes Yetzirah, Beriyah, Atzilus. For sure. Asiyah Ruchnis is one step. Asiyah Ruchnis means all the energies are in place, but now you need someone to come and put on let's call it like the cover, the package. The package is the Gashmis. That's a whole different story. Because the Gashmi is the pure, like for example, the fire. What makes Gvura into fire, physical fire, is more than just, because you could take Gvura and diminish it 1,000,000 times, it's not going to become fire. So you need something that some other force that makes it into a. But it's a good point. But that's more like It's almost like when you make a car, you have the whole car ready, and the only thing is missing is the so-called frame. So then comes the frame, then comes Asiyah Gashmis. There's the frame So now you have a physical thing. It's a mystery how that happens. It's like the mystery of birth. An egg is fertilized by a seed, okay, and then suddenly. What happens? When does life begin? Suddenly two physical things that were a second before were dead. They were not shaykh to life. They join. Something happens and a soul enters. And it begins to grow. And suddenly we pop out. Here we are. So that little step is similar to the thing. But everything is there already. The seed and the egg have all the properties and qualities that the child is going to develop. But they're not yet, we can't call it a life. It's just like a seed that has potential in it. Life is what makes it start growing, and then suddenly and now you look at a human being like us, you have the genes and heredity features of your parents. You can look like them, color eyes, personality. So we have the forces were there, but then there's the thing called life that gave you physical body, suddenly became, that's a mystery no one really understands. So you always need to say there's something that's added that adds that so-called physical dimension. Okay, so now levad zeisha esesfiz bepratis madrigosim b'chinas ma'ala mata. Besides the fact that the 10 spheres in their specific levels, there's higher and lower, as he said, higher and lower intensity of energy and their fundamental personalities. The general structure of the 10 spheres in the 4 worlds are also ma'alamata. And go and explain. The 10 spheres exist in every world. I just explained that at length. Right? Just like there are 10 spheres in Atzilus, the same thing, there are 10 spheres in Beriyah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. The 10 spheres of Beriyah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, they're not 10 different spheres. The same 10 spheres, not Atzilus, as they go downward, they are transmitted from the Esser spheres of Atzilus. L'Tanya, for example, in Ayin Beis, what does he say? Ayin Gimel, Nishtalshul Mehen. The Esser Keches HaNefesh, Nishtalshul from what? From the 10 spheres. So there you go. I mean, the Keches HaNefesh is already in Asiyah. But the 10 spheres, basically, they originate in Atzilus and they go downward. U'Makom Mokim, Ein Adema Esser spheres the Beriyah, L'Gab Esser spheres Atzilus. Nevertheless, you can't compare. They're not similar, the 10 spheres in Beriyah, compared to the 10 spheres in Atzilus. Like it says in the Akdama of Tikkunei Zohar, the Esser spheres, the Beriyah, that the 10 spheres of Beriyah, Hein begins the Yukna, the Malka, the Chutma. One second. The Chutma, V'lav the Yukna, the Malka Mamish. Okay. What does it say in the Tikkunei Zohar? It says like this. I need reading glasses, my friends. I can't read the words anymore. Tell me if I say something completely wrong and I explain it the wrong way. I'm just concerned I may explain the whole Seder Shtalshlus upside down. It's all right. I mean, and one misreading and you can suddenly turn the whole thing upside down. So don't say 1 second. Where'd you get that from? So just correct me if I see something here. Huh? Yeah. So the translation, the translation I know. So that's what begins the Yukna. The Yukna de Malka is the beard. Is the how does he translate? The Yukna de Malka, bechutma, v'lav the Yukna de Malka mashmash. What's bechutma? Bechesma. Bechesma, like in a temple, right? But I want to see what he says. The Yukna is the image. I'm sorry, I said beard. No. Tikkunei is beard. The Yukna is the image. Tzura. The Beriyah begins the Yukna de Malka, the image of the king, bechutma, as it's like in a signet, right? In a ring, we speak later, Shaiva, and we spoke about a seal. How do they translate?
So it's not the Yukna itself.
Seal, huh? B'chesim. The lav the Yukna de Malka mamish, not the image of the king itself. It would be like kings. They would make an image, let's say, in a coin. They would what do they call? They would take an image and put it in a coin. Let's say if it was done in Shaiva in wax. So you don't have the image itself. It's not the king itself. He's saying basically that shows you that's the spheres of Beriyah are not Atzilus. They're the Yukna de Malka b'chesma, v'lav the Yukna de Malka mamish. Kameis the spheres Atzilus. So in that spheres Atzilus you have the image also Tzelem Elokim. It's also an image. Remember he explained earlier that God of course has no image. In the beginning of chapter 5, I believe. But the way Atzilus is the way the Adam Elyon is the way Elokus defines itself in Chesed, in Achachma Bina and Atzir. This was the beginning of chapter 5. So it's only, like he says, it's how Atzilus has the Lamam Chins Akbola. So Atzilus is how it's shaped. So Atzilus is the Yukna Mamish. Atzilus would be the image itself, like seeing the king himself. And in Beriyah, it's not mamish, it's the image, the way it's engraved inside of a chesim, inside of a seal. That's the Yetzirah it says, Hem kamei diyukna de chesim b'shaiva.
So you apply the seal.
Right, exactly. So, and the next level is, so you have, they would make a seal. A seal would be like a piece of wood or a piece of metal that had the image of the king.
They have rings.
Right. And then they would go and put that into a wax. And that wax could be on a piece of paper, and that would be like a decree of the king So you have three levels here. You have the image of the king when you see his face. You have how he is in the seal, and then you have how the seal is posed on wax. It's a copy of a copy of a copy, basically. It's a carbon copy. I remember Dalman Garadi once told me, he said to me, in the olden days, when they first started, before printing presses, they always had printing presses, when they would print kopir, which is a maimor asicha from the Rabbeim. So in those days, you didn't just print the original, they would put it on a, what they call a stencil. We'd had it also in school. And they would make it, so the first copy was sharper. The second copy was not so sharp. The third copy was even weaker, like carbon copies. And so he says that people would stay up all night and stand by mimeograph, right? Would stand by the beams in the printing place, and the guy who stood first would get the first copy. The guy the next beam would stand the next copy, and if you were like the last, you would get the weakest copy, which of course you couldn't read completely. Anyway, so that's the Yetzirah. What about Asiya? Doesn't say here. Okay, but so it says that in the wax. So we see from this that's not Dema. You can't compare the sefirot the way they are in Atzilus and the way they're the same thing, the same image. Remember, I spoke before. The same idea is going from Atzilus into Asiya. It's not. You're not talking about something different, but now it's taking on. It's already a reflection or a copy of something before. That's the example. But okay, so it's going to say this. But the Beriyah einam kemuhus esesfiras that Azilus klal. So, in a way, that the 10 spheres of Beriyah are not at all like the same personality of the 10 spheres of Atzilus at all. Klal. So we see from this that in addition to the 10 spheres themselves having Ma'ila Mata, right? Chachma, Bina, Midas, and Malchus, that also the general 10 spheres as they evolve from level to level in the worlds also have Ma'ila Mata. He's going to explain now what this Ma'ila Mata is. The Tikkunei Zohar is only a mashal. It's an example that you have the image as it's inside of a seal, and you have the seal as it makes the image inside of a wax. You can explain what is the difference between them. Is it just a copy? Like we said before, remember there's going to be a difference both in the etzem uhus, they're fundamentally different, and also in the level of energy of oyer that's inside each of them. And we'll see here how an asiya can get so distorted. You see, when you see the king's face, you can't make a mistake. Once you see an image of his face, or an image of an image, then you can lose sight of what his purpose is.
But it seemed like before you were saying it gets more detailed as it goes down. And it seems with the mushroom we're using with the image of the seals, it gets more muddied and less detailed.
But both at the same time. As it gets more detailed, it gets more muddied. Because when you're in the source, you can't get muddied. When you start breaking things into detail, look, God wants a world like ours. See, this is the purpose is this world, but this world gets muddied because it loses sight of its original source in the process. Obviously, the whole purpose is realigning the two.
He wanted to feel, how does it feel to be made out of wax?
Or lower.
Or lower.
Yeah, remember, wax, there's other substances he's not mentioning here.
What's it talking about see? What he doesn't mention?
I don't know. I have to look into Tikkunei Zohar if Tikkunei Zohar says something, he doesn't mention it, or what? I mean, it's called research, my friend.
Aber das sagst du nicht nur Kamos von mir, das ist...
He didn't say, he's going to explain now. It's all garnished. Because he said that before about the spheres, so I'm assuming he's going to say the same thing here. Based on the Rebbe Rashab's consistency, I would think that's what he's going to do. Let's see. The plot is unfolding. When you watch the Havdalah movie, not that anyone's ever watched a movie, right? You wait till it unfolds, right? You know what a movie is?
Usually jump.
Huh?
Yeah, I used to know.
Okay. Or a book. I mean, you jump to the end? Okay. So go ahead. You can go to the end of Ayin Beis. It's not going to help you much.
Yeah.
But you're going to lose, you know what? The suspense. There's a suspense involved there. Yeah? You don't like the suspense? It's good to have the suspense. Then you anticipate. You know, like they say, It's always more pleasant to want than to have. Is that right?
Even guilt?
Geld is a shayla. Yeah, there's some things that's so muddied that because I tell you why, because you could have and also want at the same time. That's why. So the point is, once you have what you want, that's the problem. Then it's not as geschmack. But once you have and you always want more, so here goes the explanation. The inyan of this is the inyan neida. It's known sheyesh parsa ben Atzilus leBeriyah, that there's a parsa. A parsa literally is a curtain. Masach is a curtain. Parsa is a veil, a shield. These are all correct words. Parsa. Anyway, there's a veil, a shield, what I just call it, a curtain between Atzilus and Beriyah. Di'ina parsa kamei hamoshel. What's a parsa? A parsa is like an example. An example is a completely strange, alien from the nimshal. Moshel is an example, nimshal is what it's an example for. So if you're giving someone an example, why are you giving them an example? Why not just explain what it is? Because they're not, they for some reason may be too abstract or maybe too distant from them, so you need an example from their world. So you give a moshel from a dover zar, which means like a moshel they can identify with. One of the big jokes we had in yeshiva, and that was the first time I realized that we're not being taught Chassidus right, was stop mentioning names. When our mashpia gave us an example, the difference between Eid and Shefa, he explained there was the difference between soda and ketchup. So soda you just pour into a cup, and it's like, it just flows. So it's Eid. Ketchup, he says, you see, it comes like in pieces, and falls and gets detached from the source, so to speak. So, that's how I explained it. So you can imagine, because shefa means, oyer can't be without the moyer. Don't ask, soda could also, but that's another story. But he meant to say it's a flow, it's a smooth flow. And shefa is like a shpa and disconnected. And I remember looking, and I didn't really was learning Chassidus yet. It was like at the end of the day, and I looked at someone sitting there, and I said, what? Like this is meant to explain to us the edelkeit of Chassidus. And I always remember this. I never used that moshel for obvious reasons. But he was giving us because he was giving us an example because we all liked French fries and ketchup. So I guess he was using a moshel from our world. You understand? I said dover zar, but even a dover zar, a strange thing. I also have a shir. The point is that we use examples from something that's outside of the idiom, meaning the paradigm of the initial content. That's the only way you can understand it. That's what an example is. So he's explaining a parsa is like a moshel, zor. And that's why a seichel, an idea that's understood through a moshel, through an example, is not the muhus. It's not the same degree, the same personality, the same essence of the seichel that's understood without the moshel, without the example. That's why also anyone ever gives you an example where the example needs more explanation than the nimshal, it's also trouble. That was another mashpia who used to give us examples. The example is more complicated than the idea in the original. So we would wonder, why are you giving us an example? And then he would spend 5 weeks explaining his example. So I remember one guy once said to him, why are you giving us an example that's taken 5 weeks to explain? Why not just explain what it says, which may take less than 5 weeks? But he became trapped in his example. Anyway, I'm just in a somewhat of a light mood, so I hope you don't mind my... now I have the chance, I have the camera, the floor, I can take vengeance against all my mashpim. God should bless them all. Anyway.
You still like ketchup?
Anyway, so he's basically saying the same thing as a parsa. Here, right here, the Rebbe Rashab shows us an example. To explain a parsa, which is a ruchnistic concept, he gave us an example from a different thing called an example. So the example itself is an example for the example. Does that make sense, what I just said? Yeah. So now k'meikenu in a pasha zo ma shemedaber me'inyan acher shalei me'inyan hatzilus. Shein eish bracha. Pasha means that he's talking. He's speaking in a different signon, a different inyan, like almost a different context. Shalei me'inyan hatzilus. That's not from Atzilus. It's almost like smuggling in when you have to speak to somebody and they can't relate to the concept itself. You speak to them a language not from the original context. I'm going to give you an example, if I may. That's a good example, I think. You want an example for an example? In the early years when I started teaching classes, maybe 30 years ago, so I remember the people that would come were from the arts and entertainment industry. And they were very spiritual, mostly Jews, but they were not from traditional spiritual sources. You know, if you ask them where they got their spirituality, it came usually from Zen Buddhism, a thing called LSD, Yetzirah. So I decided I'm going to try an experiment. Because I realized, even before I opened my mouth, I'm sitting there with a beard and a yarmulke. And those that knew me. But, many times people don't know you, so they stereotype you. I may remind one guy of an angry grandfather that schlepped him to shul on Yom Kippur, or irrelevant Hebrew school teacher, things like that. Or even a war memory. So I decided instead of using words like God, Torah, mitzvahs, Mashiach, I created a whole new language. Instead of God, I used the word the essence, or the essence of reality, the higher reality. Sometimes I would use, for New Age, particularly New Age audience, I would say, like undefined layers of cosmic energy. Instead of Torah, I use the word blueprint, or roadmap. Instead of mitzvahs, connections. Instead of Mashiach, destination.
Instead of God, the artist.
I said the higher reality. Yeah, you could say that. So, yeah. So, and it was people were like listening. They said, so there's this journey to the essence of reality through the various connections, following a blueprint, till we become aligned between the higher reality and our reality in the destination of it all. And that's all I used. And for weeks it was going great. People were like, they said, where'd you get this? This is beautiful stuff. It's so beautiful. Then one guy says to me one week, he says, tell me, are you talking about God? So I said, shh, don't spoil it for the others. So there was a perfect example. And I used the word God, Torah, mitzvahs, no way, because right away those words alienate, because people don't relate. What are you talking about? And I really believe that. Even and I'd say not only with people that are not educated, indoctrinated in Torah mitzvahs, with our people, with our own community, even more so, I would say, because we get so used to these words, they mean nothing. God means absolutely nothing, in my opinion. The way we grew up, yeah, the Eibishter, made it for neighbors, not live the Eibishter, yeah, the Eibishter Zak, the Eibishter this. But what does it mean? So for a child, a child is innocent, pure. By them, God is the real God. But once you become an adult, you're just using words. What does a mitzvah mean? What does Torah mean? My point that I'm trying to say is that what he's saying here is Atzilus. He's speaking from a different thing. It sounds like it's not Atzilus, but really it is, as he's going to say. It's just concealed. See why I gave the whole introduction? Because to understand this, really, you have to understand the difference between Atzilus and Beriyah. The whole explanation I gave before about the levels. Because Chochmah Beriyah is Atzilus. It's a different form and a different muhus, a different dimension than the muhus of Chochmah Atzilus. Like he says in Tere'er, in Pasach Eliyah, Pasha Vayera. V'yuven zal derech moshel, he's going to give an example. V'yuven zal will understand the difference. Example, basoga shalom belakus, in our comprehension of godliness. Shari kol ha'asoga belakus mepuleisav yizbarach. The entire comprehension of godliness is through his actions, through his functions, through his activities. Shadei paulos anu yedim masigim esalakus, through his paulos, through his activities, his actions, we know and appreciate and comprehend godliness. Now all actions down here on earth are in time and space. There is nothing that exists in this lower world that is not confined or defined by time and space. And therefore all our appreciation of godliness, this is very powerful stuff here. He's giving like a real... Therefore all our appreciation of godliness is nitvis, is confined, is contained, is grasped, also in a form of space. That means our imagination, our tziyur sichli, our way of envisioning in our minds, godliness, shalanu, is in a form of space. Within this itself, there's a difference between the helam and dakus. You don't see this very often in Azilus, in Amaimer, as a breakdown of... This is, I think, completely unique to Ayin Beis. I don't think anywhere this speaks so. This is usually what they say by Fabrengen, not official. So in this itself, there's differences between being a hel and v'hadakus. And he says in the parentheses, he says, "Hainu be'efen atzir imhu b'akshamay b'dakus oirak behelam." Meaning, in the way we imagine, the way we envision, the way we tzir actually is the way we ascribe, the way we paint. I said imagine. Tzir is tzir. Whether it's whether it's bakshama, meaning very coarse or crass, or bedakus, or very refined and subtle and edel, or irak behelam, or it's only concealed. What does he mean by concealed? I'm not sure. Okay, because in a very lofty concept and godliness, or by a person who's a very big seichel, has a great mind, the same inyan is not grasped by him so much with a same type of image. And by him radiates more the subtlety, the energy of the concept, as opposed to its so-called physical image. Basically, what he's saying is that everything in this world is defined by space and time and space. So also our comprehension of God and His actions are by space. But in this itself, there are levels. I'm trying to understand what the meaning of helam. The helam of what? The helam of godliness, he means probably. He means the helam of godliness, I'm assuming. Because in the parentheses he says, Akshamed dakus oirak behelam. See, Akshamed dakus is Akshamed. What do they say? I wish they knew. I'm sure this doesn't say much. What?
ויש באופן שכלל לא מציירים עניין של מקים. וזה קיום בהלם בסיס מידע של הסוגה.
I don't know what he's talking. Let me see. I think it's exact opposite, by the way, because look at the next line. He says, There's nothing that looks like it. No, by him. That's what he means. Okay, they are correct. What he means is as follows. In this world, no matter how it is, space is a defining factor because everything occupies space. So even when we envision God, they say He's beyond space. So if you're very edel seichel, so you have more of a sense of it in a very spiritual sense. So you can't say space is very tangible, but it's still ultimately in a form of space. Behelam. That's what he's saying here. So be'in helam v'adakus is interesting. Helam v'adakus is almost like Chaba Atalia. The mokim is more behelam when you have the idea more bedakus. In the parentheses he says that if natzim ibakshame, okay, hakshame, so the mokim is very, very defined. Bedakus, the mokim is not defined. But then he says oirak behelam. What does that mean? Oirak im hubakshame ibedakus oirak behelam. Aha, it's higher than dakus. That's what it means. Dakus, the space, you're already more subtle. Oirak behelam. To be inyan now because okay. Aber behelm hakolu nitvis b'tzir demokim.
The common denominator is that be'elam is zichur.
We should make a time now because I'm ready to.
Okay, I didn't know you came back.
Okay, no, fine. Email me so we'll.
Yeah.
Aber behelm hakolu nitvis b'tzir demokim. What time is it now? 10?
10:16.
But because hakolu nitvis b'tzir demokim. Meaning, even by this person, you have to say that it's behelm, the tzir of mokim is there. Let's continue. Let's see. And we know that godliness is not defined by space, God forbid. Nevertheless, as much as we negate the tzir, the image, and hakshama, and the crassness, and the physicality, the anthropomorphism of godliness, that's what he's saying. Nevertheless, it's still somewhere concealed, somewhere there's still an identification with space. Huh?
What's that word?
Anthropomorphic. Anthropomorphism is when you say that God doesn't have arms and legs. You're basically the idea that you can't that God is not defined by spatial things. So it's critical. They always say it's critical to not apply anthropomorphism to God. Bottom line, he's saying even as much as you negate it, you still cannot completely free yourself from that. This is actually very freeing to know this. The Rebbe Rashab sagt das, "Afil af abas seichel gadol." But interesting how he calls it behelm. What does he mean by behelm? It means because the person is dominated by the concept that's so refined and subtle that he's not thinking of space. But somewhere deep inside, somewhere hidden there, is still the context is still a spatial context. That's what he's saying. It's known that the inyan of space is only till this 9th sphere. We're talking here the structure based on the Rambam of the Tisha Galgalim, right? That there is around Earth there are many spheres, and Galgalat Shi is the 9th sphere. Well, the Mailam of Galgalat Shi muskim kol hachokim she'en sham makom klal, and higher than the 9th sphere, all the philosophers agree. It's agreed upon by all the philosophers. There's no space at all. This is a concept from Maimonides, which is hard to understand really today, because today, like where exactly is there no space? So I'm not going to go into it right now, but basically, based on that model, there's a point where there's no space, but he's going to explain how even that's also connected to space. The comprehension there, that's higher than the 9th, I don't stand the Vihi. The comprehension there is one that's higher than the 9th sphere, meaning higher than space as we know it. Vihi hasogas hamalachim, who gam came a pules of his baruch. Oh, it's supposed to be like this. The comprehension there, which is the comprehension of angels, is also through God's actions. But there, it's from God's actions that are not defined by space, meaning, for example, when we say God came down on Har Sinai, let's take even the most subtle interpretation of that. So physically it means the Jews were standing and they suddenly, what they see? Some divine presence came down on Har Sinai. So spiritually, what you mean is, it was more of a spiritual descent. But was there something? But you're still thinking in terms of a Har Sinai and a sky. And what happened? Did God come down? So no matter, even if you understand down meaning only conceptually down, still because we're bound by time and space, somewhere we still think in terms of higher and lower like that. Angels don't think in space like that, but they still think of God as actions, and actions also have a certain definition. That they're not they don't occupy space. So if so, the comprehension of there on the higher than the ninth sphere is in a divine dimension that is not graspable, that's not contained by space. But this type of comprehension, in our comprehension, we cannot at all understand. How could there be something that does not have any space? It's completely higher than our category, the scope of our comprehension. We do not know how and what that is. The thing is, what's confusing me a little is the Malachim do have a comprehension of higher than space. But he says that's also Pul Esav, which is what he began with saying. Okay, bottom line is we don't have their comprehension. So if that's the case, our comprehension of the divine, that is contained, everything is contained in an image of space, is not at all like the personality of the comprehension above, that is not confined in any type of space. All this is coming to explain how Biyah is so different than Atzilus. So he's going to say, and similar to this, an example, and similar to this, or an example to this, similar to this, is the general comprehension in Biyah and Yetzirah compared to the comprehension in Atzilus that's not at all from the same personality. The just like our comprehension in this material world, where space is the dominating factor, is a completely different type of comprehension than the comprehension of the worlds of Biyah, spiritual Biyah, which is the angels, who do understand beyond space. So it's a double jump. We, compared to Biyah Ruchnim, which does not occupy space, are completely different. The same thing as Biyah Ruchni is compared to Atzilus, is a completely different type of comprehension. Going back to the Lashon that he said, that what's a parsa? That's the expression. He speaks from something, a different idiom, a different paradigm that's not from the same paradigm of Atzilus. That means the comprehension and the knowledge and the comprehension of the divine in the world of Beriyah is from a different paradigm, different context than it is, that's not divine as it is in Atzilus. The Atzilus harei hakol hu elokus mamish. In Atzilus, everything is divine mamish. Remember we said about Yeshus. There's no ego. There's no self. There's no sense of substance. Everything is part of the divine plan. Everything is aligned to the divine plan. He keeps going back to that expression. And when you're speaking about something that's not from Atzilus, it means that from something else that's not divine, you understand and comprehend the divine. So it's like a mashal. So Beriyah is already now another paradigm. This comprehension is completely different personality than the comprehension of Atzilus. And now he continues. And also this, what Imei, that's Bina. I should just give a little preface here. The four worlds, Atzilus, Beriyah, Yetzirah, Asiyah, really also originate from the four levels of the spheres. Chochmah says Abba Mekana be'Atzilus. Chochmah radiates in Atzilus. Imei, Bina, radiates in Kursaya. That's the chair, the throne. That's the world of the throne is Beriyah. Zoh Mekana be'Yetzirah. And Malchus is Mekana ba'Asiyah. So the same four levels we talked before about the structure and spheres they become the four driving forces of the four worlds. So now he's saying, and also this, what we say, Imilah, that the Bina of Atzilus, Mekano is like a Canaan, is like stuck in. Like what I say, when you say no, it's it's more like kind of rests, yeah. Rests and bodies. Yeah, Neitza is more thrust. Neitza is what? The beginning is wedged. It's not wedged, right? It's not wedged. Mekana b'kusai. So even when we say that Beriyah is coming from Atzilus too, it's coming from Bina of Atzilus. Nevertheless, when it comes into Beriyah, you can't compare Bina and the way Bina is now in the world of Beriyah, the way it's not Atzilus. The Atzilus harihu b'chinas yichud in b'chinas hachachma, because in Atzilus Bina is united with Chachma. Like it says, v'no yotzim Eden, the river flowed out of Eden in the beginning of Chumash. The Nar flowed out of Eden. The Nor b'chinas Bina. Nor is the river. Is the level of Bina U'Kaned, the Chacham Bina Kamei Mayin V'Nor. As it's known that Chacham Bina is like the source, the spring, and Nor is the river that flows out of it. The Mayin Hu Neviya Daka, Mayon, the spring is a very subtle and a very Edel and Neviya Daka, a very subtle flow. Shezab B'chinas Ayin the Chachma. That's the Ayin that he spoke earlier about. The substancelessness of Chachma. Ubinu b'chinas tispashtus. And Bina is, when that flows out into, expresses itself in details, that's Bina. Uksiv v'nor yoytze, and the expression v'nor yoytze, and the river flowed out of, shezo yoytze tamid b'li hefsek. It's always flowing out, consistently, incessantly flowing out without a hefsek, without any block, without any impediment. Hainu b'chinas yichud v'dveikus. Which means that Bina is in a form of union and attachment to its source, Chachma. But that's in Atzilus. Then afterwards it says, after the river flows out of Eden, Masham Yeparad. And then the river spread, from there it spread and broke, Yeparad, it's separated into four rivers. What does that mean? Pirish, after Bina, the river flows out of Chachma. This is not Atzilus. Chachma is the spring, the spark, the point. From there flows out a river, it goes through this Atzilus. After it flows from Bina through the B'chinas Malchus, the lowest level of Atzilus, u'mispashetes, u'mislabeshes b'biyah, and it extends and manifests in Beriyah Yetzirah, harihu b'chinas pirid. There now it's already separate. It's no longer connected and attached. That means misham yeparid, that it's separated outside of. Like it says in Likutei Torah, in the Maimer Shishim Heim Melacha is the first Maimer, the first Drush. So here we have it, that even though a Beriyah comes from Bina of Atzilus, but now it came after Yeparid, after a separation, so it's no longer the same level. And even though in the world of Beriyah there's a divine comprehension, nevertheless it's completely not comparable to the comprehension in the world of Atzilus. And we can say the you can say that the general intelligence, internal intellect in the world of Beriyah is the intelligence that's connected to emotions. Should we stop here perhaps? Because it's a half a chapter, there's going to be another half a chapter, it's going to take time. Okay, we'll stop right here by the Yesh Leimer. So bottom line, let me just sum up. We did the beginning of chapter 45, first half, pages 77, 78 to the top of 79, and the summary is essentially that he's now explaining how the structure of the spheres, not just within the spheres themselves, but how they evolve from level to level, is also higher and lower. And the basic explanation so far has been that Beriyah comes through a parsa, a curtain, a separation. And that separation he compares to an example, a mashal. And he explained how we gave an example that we can't understand something, an example to understand that he gave from our own, that we can't really comprehend something beyond space. That means we can't even comprehend Beriyah Ruchni. And Beriyah Ruchni compared to Atzilus is similar to that. So we're in the middle of the discussion how Beriyah is very distinguishable from Atzilus, even though it still has similarities, but there's a big jump. And that's defining the Milo Mata from Atzilus to the lower worlds. And we'll continue tomorrow. We'll continue chapter 45. So we stop here and top of page 79.